Oh, okay. Welcome back to Welcome back to International Business. We have a very, very busy day. Let's take care of some quick house cleaning items. This week, this week, we have a midterm. Egad. Yes, no, we have a midterm, and it will be I'll go over more details of it on Thursday in Thursday's class, but I wanted to prep you that the midterm is going to be comprehensive over the last few classes that we have had. This is the fourth week, and it will be comprehensive from day one. So hopefully every single class that we have is better than the previous. And so today I am bringing to you some global negotiating points and tips. We've been talking about global negotiations now for about, I think it's been 2 sessions, and now we're going to take another deep dive into some global negotiating tactics. And if you have anything that you want to share, please do. Please do. Welcome, Dave. Good to see you. And I'm just going to get started. So really quickly, I have a question for you. What is the best way you think, and we've gone over this, what is the best way you think it is to enter a new market? What's the best way to enter a new market? Oblique attack and JV, both of you are correct. Fantastic. Fantastic. Oblique or guerrilla. Actually, all of you are correct. I love it. I love it. Man, oh man. Right on. Every single one of you hit it right on the head. So I want to point out that one hallmark of a great joint venture, is recognizing that the relationship or the creation of this relationship benefits both parties, and that neither party could have done on their own what both have done together. Okay? Both are reliant on each other. Neither could have done successfully the actual joint venture on their own. They couldn't have done the project on their own without the joint venture. Okay, so successful hallmark is 2 companies where neither one could have successfully done the launch on their own. Now, am I talking about collective or distributed bargaining? Question, am I talking about collective or distributed bargaining? Hello, Tim. Good to see you. I am talking about collective. I am talking about collective. Remember, distributed bargaining is short term. And what we're talking about, especially with international business, is hopefully long term. Hopefully long term. Okay, so we are talking about collective bargaining. Okay, that's what you meant. Okay, excellent. Excellent. I use that line with my wife all the time. Yeah, that's what I meant to say, babe. All right. Now, I want to point out that before we get into the negotiations, and this is an important point, before we get too far into negotiations, when you're negotiating internationally, there are very few legal mechanisms to enforce your contract. Very few legal mechanisms to enforce your contract. I form a relationship, a long-term relationship with a supplier in China. I know that the contract is not going to be enforceable. So don't push it to a point where they walk away. Okay, because then you're going to be digging for a new supplier. And that might take weeks, months, could take years, or it could take a year. Make sure that you remember in the back of your mind that very few legal contracts internationally are enforceable. The process, even if it is enforceable, is so tedious. Now, I did hear of a U.S. company that sued an Indian company, and they finally did win. They did win the legal lawsuit in India. It only took about, I think it was 8 years. It only took 8 years. So remember that point, that very few legal contracts are enforceable. That's absolutely serious. And yeah, time enough to be out of business. So when we talk about long-term relationships, we're talking about really building a relationship that is beyond the recitals of your contract. That is beyond the recitals of your contract. So, these are Senor Chavez's tips to negotiate. We've got lots of tips. Tips to global negotiating. Number 1, listen. And some of these are obviously going to be applicable to you here in the United States. Be a good listener. Be a good listener. I had I forget who it was that had written this, and it was back in it was one of our founding fathers, and he said, this is him prepping for a negotiation, I spend 2/3 of my time thinking of what they are going to say, and 1/3 of my time thinking of what I'm going to say. Usually we spend all of our time thinking about how we're going to present, how it is that we're going to negotiate. But make sure you listen. Make sure you're aware of what they're saying and that you're listening to what they're saying. Again, this has everything to do with translation. We talked about it the other day. When somebody says no in another country, that could be an invite, and most likely it is an invitation for you to begin. Okay? We talked about self-awareness. What is self-awareness and why is it significant? What is self-awareness? You remember what self-awareness is? Self-awareness is how they view you. How do you want them to perceive you? What are the traits and characteristics that you want them to see? You have control over how people view you, how people see you. You have control over what you say. That's self-awareness. That is self-awareness. Empathy. What is empathy and why is empathy important? What is empathy and why is empathy important? Putting yourself in their shoes. And you're absolutely right, Ben. And Ben, maybe, or Randy, or whoever, to what end? To what end? Why do you want to put yourself in someone else's shoes? You aren't asking them to do something unethical? No. Well, I think you're right, Randy. Cultural IQ, Ben, okay, so expand on that. To understand where they're coming from, exactly, Tim, to understand where they're coming from. If you know how they think, will you be a better negotiator? If you understand how they think or why they think a certain way. Will you be a better negotiator? That's right. That's what he meant. Yes, you will. Absolutely, you will. Absolutely. Each one of these points has a meaning. It's not just, this isn't just rhetoric. This is my experience that I am transferring to you. This is not some academic, it's not some academic process. This is real life, real world, real time. Number 4, food. We haven't spoken about food yet. Well, we kind of did. We kind of did. Food. Take away the food. Take away the food, and you'll stress out your counterpart. Take away the food, and you're going to see your counterpart freak out. How many of you have been, I know a lot of you locally have been, or I should say domestically in the United States, how many of you have been in a negotiation and it is starting to near towards lunchtime and you want to keep going, or somebody wants to keep going, and all of a sudden you see everybody agree, yeah, let's go get some lunch. We'll come back in an hour. How many of you have been a party to that? How many of you have been a party to that? Yeah, we'll just come back in an hour. That's when you say, no, we're going to continue. We're going to continue, and we're going to try to finish. Why? Why would I tell you to do something? This isn't unethical. This is business. This is international business specifically. Why would I tell you continue? Forget what your stomach is thinking. Override your stomach for an hour. Why would I tell you to keep going? Why would I tell you to keep going? When you start seeing the stress in your counterpart's eyes because they're hungry, you are going to get more yeses. You are going to get them to agree to more things quicker. Not necessarily to finish up, but to make sure that you get to those points and you get them to agree to you quicker. This is important. This is important. In international business, I have been starved out before. Believe me, I have seen it, and it works. It works. Food is a very important part of culture. You take it away, or you push through lunch or dinner, and you're going to start realizing that you're going to get more than what you want. So what I suggest, this is what I do, is I tell my partners before the meeting, listen, I don't care if you start chewing and eating your pencil. If we are going into lunch and I say, no, let's keep going, no matter if the counterpart, to be polite, they will probably say, okay. Do not agree with them. Do not agree with them. I tell my team, do not agree, yeah, let's go to lunch. Okay, so this is part of your preparation. This is part of your preparation. Is that how Apple negotiates? I don't know. That's how I negotiate internationally, and I'll tell you what's effective. So I'm teaching you what is effective and teaching you what works. Space. Space is a way to control or manipulate negotiations. I told you about a French buddy of mine, I think, who, when we're talking, our space is about yay wide. And then when he starts negotiating, guess what? He's right here. He's right here. And as an American, I do what? I kind of take a step back. And as a Frenchman, what does he do? He continues. He continues. Until I say what? Okay, we'll eat wherever you want. Okay, I'll buy that from you. I don't care. Right? That's what happens. Space is very important in international business. And you're going to see in international business, you're going to see other cultures take that space away from you. Because they know that Americans need the what rule. How many feet do we need? It's the 3-foot rule, right? And Artemis needs 3,000 feet. And Randy needs 5 feet. Goodness, now that you're aware of this, I know you're kidding, Artemis. I like that you bring some levity to the class, as well as Ben. But now that you're aware of this, do not give in. It's very common to see Americans, as soon as that other culture starts to take away that space, we start giving in. Okay, yeah, sure. My French buddy, literally, he's taller than I am. He's about 6'2", 6'3". I'm about 6'2". Just kidding. Closer to 5'10". At least that's what I keep telling my wife. Anyways, so he's about 6'2", 6'3", and I literally start bending backwards because he's so close to me. And he wants to talk and he wants to negotiate, and that's how he gets what he wants. Because I'm like, yeah, okay, let's go, and then I'm out the door. And then he's standing over there, right? How many of you have had this happen? Space is a very important part to international business. A very important part. Ben, it looks like Ben's had this happen, so make sure not to brush your teeth before negotiating with a Frenchman. Well, that could be, but you certainly don't want to offend anybody. There's other ways to do it. Just be aware. Just be aware. I'm not kidding. He gets so close, it's almost like if I accidentally slipped, we're going to kiss. I mean, it's a serious issue, and you need to be aware of it. That's something that other cultures will do with us. It's also very Asian as well. And none of this is derogatory to anybody, all right? This is just expanding on some of my, it's also very Asian. I remember seeing I was in India, and we were waiting in line for something, and there was an Indian that was somewhat impatient, which is very rare in general unless they spent time in the U.S., and was somewhat impatient, and they stood right in front of the gentleman letting people in, and their space was behind us. But that gentleman didn't want any part of this stress or this issue, and let them in. Let them in. All right. Temperature. The temperature is also a way that you will see other cultures negotiate against us. They will control the temperature. They will either leave the temperature at the outside temperature or whatever it is outside, the ambient temperature outside, which could be very hot, or what's going on over here? Or they will turn the AC down to a point where, do we want that box? Is that box supposed to be up there? Oh yeah, that's me, okay. Or they will turn the temperature down to a point where it's so cold, you're just going to want to get out of there. Either way, you're going to want to get out of there, and they're going to be asking you for concessions. They're going to be asking you for things while you're freezing or while you're heating up. If you're aware of this, don't fall into the trap. I've had this happen to me repeatedly. This is not some once in a lifetime. These are regular occurrences. Regular occurrences. Number 7. Remove emotion. Remove emotion. Display once in a while. By this, I mean be calm. Remove the emotion. Do we want to expand that up? Oh. Remove the emotion. Show calmness. Speak clearly. Show it when you can. Show it when you want to. Show it when you feel it's appropriate. Somewhat like Spock, but Spock doesn't ever show any emotion, so you need to be a little bit more emotional than Spock. Remember, they're reading you. They are constantly analyzing your temperature. They're constantly taking your temperature. They're constantly trying to figure out what it is that makes you tick. What it is that makes you tick. Number 8. Less is more. And I'm referring specifically to more people at the table, the harder it is to negotiate. The more people at the table, the harder it is to negotiate. The more people, this is absolutely true. Has anybody experienced this? Has anyone experienced that? Now, I found the statistic that I was looking for the other day. In the United States, the average negotiating time is 1.5 days. Average negotiating time is 1.5 days. In Asia, it's 1 week. It's 1 week. The average negotiation in the U.S. is 1.5 days. The average negotiation in Asia is 1 week. Don't plan on going to Asia for 3 days. You're not going to get anything done. Let me save you some money. Okay? Number 9. Cooperation should be your first move. Why is cooperation, why do I say cooperation should be your first move? Why is cooperation so important? Why should that be your first move? To try to be cooperative. It sets the tone. There you go, Randy. It sets the tone of the entire negotiation. How many of you have walked in, and just, it doesn't have to be in a negotiation, how many of you have walked into work or walked into your house or walked into a building and that person had a bad moment right before you walked in, or had a bad night the day before, whatever it is? How did that help or hinder the rest of the day or the time that you were going to be there? It certainly didn't help. It certainly didn't help. So your attitude should be one of cooperation. Again, foreign contracts are very, very rarely enforceable. Okay? Here's another point. So we're going to put set the tone. Here's another one. 60% of all JVs fail within 4 years. So if you're not cooperative, if you're not thinking about cooperation with an international, you're probably going to be one of these 60%. That's a huge percentage. We've talked about the importance of launching an oblique attack, a guerrilla marketing attack, and of course, launching in through a joint venture. And yet I'm also telling you 60% fail within 4 years. You sure as heck better be cooperative. You sure better be cooperative. Why do 60% of all joint ventures fail? Mostly due to culture. And I'm going to expand on that. Let's get a little more granular. Mostly due to culture. Meaning that you are not being empathetic. You've not built that cultural IQ. And let me tell you something, when a joint venture fails, it might be that the counterparty was not helping you in any way. It might be that they are at fault majority. Now remember, it takes two to tango. So in my eyes, if a joint venture fails with me on the team, whose fault is it? Who am I going to point the finger at? Who am I going to point the finger at? I'm going to point the finger at myself, Artemis. You're absolutely right. Because I understand I have control. I understand. Now, there are things that are going to be out of my control, but most of the time I'm going to blame myself simply because I'm part of this. I understand how to negotiate internationally. I understand all of the points that we're talking about and then some. I have that experience. I would blame myself. And it doesn't do any good. I'm here to tell you, and I've been here, it doesn't do any good to blame the other counterparty when you got to tell your boss or your superior, hey, this didn't work out because they didn't do this or they didn't do that. Guess what? You're the one who failed ultimately. That's the way it's going to be perceived. That's the way it's going to be perceived. Number 10. When stuck, walk away, take a breather. Why am I saying when you're stuck in a negotiation, there's an impasse, walk away from it, take a breather, say, look, I'm going to take a step away for a minute. Why do I say walk away for a short period of time? Gives perspective. It gives perspective. What else? To let everyone cool down for a minute or two. What's Ben going to say? Regain your focus, as Roberto says, sends a message you might walk away. I hadn't really, you know what, I hadn't really thought of this, but you're right. I have actually thought of it during the negotiation, but I didn't think about it today. Reorganize your thoughts. These are all right. But what I'm here to tell you is that when you get into an impasse, if you start showing emotions, that's when you start losing. If you start getting a little hot and you start talking a little bit louder and you start showing some of your emotions, you're starting to lose. That's the beginning of the end. That's exactly what they want. Before you start to show emotions, you take a step back. Now, there are times when you will show emotion, and you need to calculate it. There have been times that I've walked into a meeting, and before I walked into a meeting, I told my partners, look, if they say this, I am going to consciously show a certain amount of emotion. So don't interrupt me. Just keep your mouth shut. It's a calculated move. There are times, now if I'm by myself, I don't need to tell anybody that, but sometimes I've done it, and then your team members sense that you're in jeopardy. They sense that you're in trouble, and they want to help, so what do? They jump in, right? They jump in. And then that muddies the argument. And they defend you. That's absolutely right. You want to make sure that you tell your partners, listen, if they start going down this rabbit hole, I'm going to keep them at the table. I'm going to show some emotion. Just keep your mouth shut. I don't want you jumping in. I have control of what it is that I'm doing, okay? You don't want them to, and bless their souls, are there to help you, and you're there to help them, and they want to defend you, but the reality of it is you need to have control of your emotions, and you display them at appropriate times. Concessions are important. What are concessions? Concessions are important. Options. Things you give in on, absolutely. Absolutely. You should go into the negotiation willing to give up certain concessions. Things you give in on. To make them happy, the little things. The little things matter. They might not matter so much to you, but they matter to your counterpart, which then means it matters to you. All right? Initially, it might not mean that much to you, but at some point, concessions are going to be given. At some point, concessions are going to be given. And this helps make the win-win, as Ben states. Absolutely, absolutely. Let's pause it here for a second, and let me tell you that in Asia, and I think we went over this already, in Asia, it's very common that you get them to agree. You need to make sure that they are actually agreeing to the negotiation, because oftentimes it's very common for your counterpart in Asia to nod or say yes. And what they're really saying is, I heard you. I don't agree with you, I hear you. Okay, so you need to make sure that it's not I heard you, but I agree to agree. I agree to agree. You're going to have to become explicit. Definitely in India, definitely in China, definitely in Japan also. In most of Asia. In most of Asia. Now, let's take another dive here. This was Senor Chavez's tips continued. Now, this is still tips. This is still information along the lines of what we were just talking about. But this is about preparation tips now. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. All right? Preparation tips. This is what I want you to do before you even get off the plane or before they get off the plane. I want you to write down relationship and commitment on a piece of paper. And I want you to describe it while you're on the plane. Write it down. Describe it as long-term or short-term. Describe it as how you want them to perceive you. Describe it as what the end game is going to be. What is this relationship going to look like in 1 year, in 3 years? I want you to describe this. I'm going to tell you, your boss will be impressed and you will be more successful. I want you to outline, and maybe that means interviewing your boss to fill in this blank, your superior. And maybe what it is you ask them, how do you perceive this relationship being in 1 year or in 3 years? That gives you a tool as to how you're going to negotiate. That tells you how you're going to negotiate based on what it is that this relationship is going to look like. That description is critically important. I also want you to write down your interests in terms of the interests that your company has. What must be satisfied for you to be successful? What must be satisfied for you to be successful? And this is part of the end game. Part of the end game that I described up here in the relationship and the commitment. Part of the result. I'm going to put your interest right here. their interests. I told you a minute ago that one of our founding fathers had said, I spend 2/3 of my time thinking about what they're going to say and 1/3 of my time prepping on what it is that I am going to say. Do you want us to actually describe a fictitious negotiation? No, you don't have to do this now. This is what you're going to do when you get into a negotiation. That's a good point, though, Artemis. This is what you're going to do when you get into a negotiation. Describe their interests. You need to estimate because you don't know. You don't know what their interest is, but you need to estimate it. And what I want you to do is I want you to later see how accurate you were. Well, you were. And what did you find out that was new? How accurate were you with this negotiation, with what you estimated their interests were? You're always going to learn more. Very rarely are you going to hit the nail right on the head. It's only, and I'm going to make this point, it's only when you reflect on your experience that you actually have experience, that you actually can use that to your advantage. I can't tell you how many individuals I know that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they have a tremendous amount of experience in their profession, but they have not reflected and they have not learned from their experiences, and thus they continue to do the same mistakes. They continue to look through the same myopic lens. You know what that's called? Yes, Tim, they should be giving some concessions also. If they're not, they're playing a little bit too hard or hardball, and they figured out that you need them more than they need you. Okay, but again, go back to that thought of what is it that both of us can do together that neither one of us can do apart. And make sure you bring that up if you sense that they're not giving any concessions. It's not insanity. What was the question that I asked? It's called provincial. It's called provincial. Being very provincial means that they come from a town or an area. You see this oftentimes in rural areas where they have a certain thought. They have a certain mindset. And they're not going to move from it. They're not going to stray from it. And it could be that that mindset is a negative mindset. It could be that that mindset is biased. They show their prejudices in the sense that they don't like certain foods. They won't try certain foods. They won't do certain things. They won't participate in certain events. It can be somewhat provincial, and that can be negotiating with somebody like this can be difficult because it's their ignorance that is preventing them from you moving forward. Remember the word provincial. I'm not going to write it, but remember the word provincial. On your piece of paper, before you go into the negotiation, you need to set some goals. What are the win-win options? What are they? Or the win-win solutions? What are they? You need to define them before you go into the negotiation. How many of you, I call it naked negotiation. How many of you have known somebody or have gone into a negotiation naked? where you didn't have any, you just had an idea as to what it is you wanted. You didn't think about the big picture. And you may have gotten what you wanted, but because you didn't think about the big picture, you gave away the farm. How many of you have had, and it's happened to me, this has happened to me, where I've gone in naked, haven't fully prepared, and have gotten what I wanted, and then later found out, oh my gosh, wait a minute. I didn't address this, and because I didn't address it, they're doing it. Buying a car, now that's a good one. That's a good one, Randy. Buying a car in distributed bargaining, you need to make sure that all of your bases are covered. I'll tell you one base that I just bought my wife a car. It was the end of last year. No, I guess now it's been like the middle of the end of last year. And I had negotiated, I knew what my price was going to be, total, with options and tax. What did I miss? What did I miss? This happened to me recently. This happened to me recently. What did I miss? The darn filing fees and paperwork and license transfers. Do you know how much that added up to? That added up to about $675. And I forgot completely about negotiating that into it because we got everything squared away. They said, okay, Mr. Chavez, here's your tax on this amount. We had to add it to we had to add your license fees and all this stuff, registration. So this is the total. It just came up to $675 more than what we asked, than what you were asked for. But again, these are our fees. And I just about went through the roof. I just about went through the roof. And the only reason why I didn't walk away is because I didn't want to do this ever again. I didn't want to forget this ever again. And it's an expensive lesson that I taught myself. And I went ahead and paid that $675 so that I would not forget to leave any stone unturned. I should have looked at all of the fees and all of the options and the taxes included. I could have gotten my price. It was a $675 lesson that I forgot. Don't forget to look at the big picture. Don't forget to look at the big picture. And with your goal setting, we need to look at the win-win options. Now, when I say we're looking at the win-win options, I'm talking about a BATNA. Does anyone know what a BATNA is? Does anyone know what a BATNA is? And that's okay if you don't, because I'm teaching it to you for the first time, and it's critically important when you're negotiating international. BATNA is your best alternative to negotiated agreement. The best alternative to the negotiated agreement. It's fancy talk for Plan A, anything beyond Plan A. Plan B, Plan C, Plan D. You have to have, let me put it in a little different terms. You have to have in any negotiation, you have to have a Plan B and a Plan C and maybe even a Plan D. What is it that you're willing to accept that allows everybody to have a win-win? You have obviously your best case scenario. And this is plan what? What plan is this? You have your best case scenario. That's plan A. Rarely does plan A ever materialize fully. You need certain aspects of plan A to be present in order for this to go through. So you're going to have to give some concessions, and you may have a base case scenario. And what plan is this? Plan B. And again, you still have what you need in order to have a win-win. And then you have your worst case scenario. And that's your plan C. Worst case scenario is you still have the win-win, it's just not plan A, right? You still have the win-win. You can go forward. You can continue to go forward. And then you have plan D. Walk away. Do not be afraid to walk away. In fact, no. Forget what I just said. Cancel that out. Do not go into a negotiation, especially internationally, unless you are prepared to walk away. When they have you on their turf, when you are in their country, they know, it's intuitive to them, they know and understand that it's an expensive trip. And if they're not paying for it, they're very likely to push the envelope to the worst case scenario or to a point beyond the worst case scenario where you should walk away and you don't. So before you go into a negotiation, your last BATNA, your best alternative to negotiation agreement, your last one is plan D. You walk away. When you're, and this is collective bargaining where you're trying to do a win-win. In distributed bargaining, do not ever, ever go with your spouse or with your children or with your friends and say, yeah, let's just go look. Let's just go look at cars. I don't have any intent on buying the car. Let's just go look. You need to say to yourself, I am going to walk away. I am not just going to go look. If I go look, I am going to walk away. That's a distributed bargaining agreement. How many of you know somebody who has said, I'm going to go look at cars, and the next thing you know, they have purchased a car? How many of you know somebody? Maybe it's been you. That's right. I have done that. And it can be an expensive lesson. So before you say to your spouse or your significant other or your family member or friend, before that comes up, you need to say to yourself, I'm prepared to walk away. In fact, even if the deal is too good to be true, let me tell you something. If the deal is really great, I don't want to say too good to be true in the sense that it's not true, but so good where you almost have to take it, walk away. They will honor, let me tell you something, they will honor your terms or the terms that they're giving you. They will honor that for at least 24 hours. Why? Because they want the sale. Again, that's mostly with the distributed bargaining. It's not bad to use the walk-away tactic in a collective bargaining situation also, but be careful. Be very careful. In the United States, we're not easily offended. In other countries, they are easily offended, and if you hit their ego, You tap their pride in a negative way. You rub their pride in the wrong way, where now their ego is affected, and it's about saving face now. They may have no choice but to walk away from you. They may have no choice whatsoever. So be careful that when you walk away, you're not offending them in a saving face kind of a manner, or otherwise you're gonna end up letting the whole deal fall through your hands. You're gonna let that whole deal fall through your hands, and all of that work, preparation, time, money, etc., is gone. These are ways. What I'm teaching you are ways that you are going to be negotiating from a position of strength. This is your leverage. This is your leverage. And your leverage is being able to negotiate from a position of strength. What if you go into a collective bargaining agreement and all your goals are met at the outset? Then you probably left something on the table. Negotiate for even better. And yeah, I would continue to try to push that envelope a little bit if you really believe that they can long-term fulfill your requirements. Because I'm here to tell you, and that's a good point, Tim. And Ben, you've got a nice point also. In life, in general, and this is very applicable to international business, you get what you ask for, not what you deserve. And it's a harsh statement. But there's a lot of truth to this. You get what you ask for. So if all of your concessions and you're in the best case scenario are met for you to win, then push the envelope. Take a breather, because you're going to be a little surprised. And it's happened. It's happened to me. But be careful that if you ask for more, they may say, okay, we'll give you this, but that means we're going to have to take away some of this. And you're like, oh, okay, no, forget it. I'll sign right now. So you might need to say, give me a couple of minutes, give me 10 minutes to think about this. Let's go to lunch and let me think about it. Or you might not even say, let me think about it. You might just say, okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's go to lunch and we'll come back and we'll talk about it a little bit more. You'll find that oftentimes they might even throw in more without you asking. So instead of you saying, let me think about it, you just say, okay, well, let's go to lunch. Let's come back in an hour or two, and we'll continue the discussions. We'll continue to move forward. They may throw in additional concessions that they have available to them or to you. And that's good negotiating. Can you have an A+? Well, now, Ben, it's in the way you phrased it. There's a difference between can and may, right? So you can have an A+. You can achieve that. The way that you should have asked is, may I have an A+? That's what you meant. That's what he meant. Yes, of course. He's been on that track all day today. Remember the difference between may I and can I. All right? All right. Good point. Now, I've got 10 more tips. And today is a very important day because international business negotiations you don't get this experience every day. So when I was prepping for this class, I really, really wanted to throw the entire book at you. Now there's more, but I wanted to throw the majority of it at you so you could absorb it all at once. These are Senor Chavez's part 2. Part 2 negotiating tips. All right. Number 1. Numero uno. Before you start negotiating, understand why you are there. I know it might seem somewhat elementary, and it is, but you wouldn't believe how many people don't even know why they're there. It's like going into a car dealership without thinking about what it is that you're willing to pay, how much, what you're going to walk away from, etc., etc. Understand why you're there. And we talked about this one last Wednesday. Make sure you're negotiating with the decision maker. I told you about how I got bamboozled with this one. And that's happened a few times where I have asked explicitly if they can make the decision and they have said yes. And I've asked again in a different way and they have said yes. Only to find out that they were there, they had said yes, why? Why did they say yes? Why did they say yes? Robert? To waste my time, exactly, and wear me down. Waste my time and wear me down. And the reality of it is, Artemis, that NBA players don't need agents. How about those apples? If they only would take it upon themselves to negotiate, that's right, they don't need agents. That's another topic. If you want people to listen, you must listen. If you want to be heard, you're going to have to be a good listener. If you want to be heard, you're going to have to be a good listener. Now, we talked about confidence. Use it. Use it. It's being measured. Your confidence is being measured the moment you walk in the door. Did you know that? Your confidence is being measured the moment you walk in the door. I'm going to give you 3 percentages. I'm going to give you 3 percentages. And then I'm going to give you an example. When you walk into a room for the first time and you haven't met someone or the individuals there are new to you, 55%. 55% of their impression of you is your confidence. 38% is going to be your gestures. 7% is what you say. 55% of your presentation is not in the content of what you are saying. It is in your delivery. It is in your confidence that you are delivering it. If I came up here and taught and said, well, yeah, I think that tip number 1 is what I mean, come on. Are you going to take me seriously? No, I've lived it and breathed it, therefore I have an extra amount of confidence. But if I came up here and delivered it confidently, you're going to take it to heart. It's the same with, yes, it's nonverbal communication. That was the actual term. %38 is your nonverbal communication. Actually, I think that's. This is not going to be part of today's class. Is going to be part of Thursday, so I'll make sure I get you the exact numbers. It's confidence, nonverbal, and what you say, your content. But imagine you walked into a negotiation and you weren't very confident. That has the same effect as letting the air out of a balloon, right? Has the same effect of the air being let out of a balloon, and is very underwhelming. Trust me. I don't know how many of you have gone into a negotiation and they weren't very confident, but it did not set the tone. It did not help. You had to wonder if they were even the decision maker. Now, I'll add. No, I'm not going to add to it because this is part of Thursday's discussion. Number 5. This is part 2. Whoops. Part 2. We talked about it before, empathy. And I can't stress it enough, so I put it again. Number 6, do not let a deadline force you into a bad decision. No decision is better than a bad decision. You follow me? No decision is better than a bad decision. Do not let a deadline, people, force you into a bad decision where you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get on this plane and I need to come back with something. Do not do that. You have diminished yourself and your reputation in front of your peers, your teammates, your counterparts, and by the time you get back to the United States, your reputation will have been mud. So do not let a deadline force you into a bad decision. And I'm here to tell you, I have made these mistakes, which is why I know. And not all of them have been huge. But as I have traveled, and as I have negotiated, and as I have gone through my journey, I have realized that there are certain points that you're just not going to get out of a book. Number 7, use your cross-cultural skills. How many of you know someone? How many of you know somebody that will never, ever travel internationally? How many of you know somebody? And how many of you know someone that you don't want them to travel internationally? Because they are going to look at the food, they're going to smell it with the face, they're going to expect, and a lot of Americans look at other countries, we look at them as a mirror of ourselves, and we expect them to behave the way that we behave. That's not the way it works. That's not the way the world works. You need to have some cross-cultural skills. I have family members. I hope they never purchase a passport. When I come back from a country, or if I come back from a market or a culture, and you know the questions they ask me, oh, did you eat that? Oh, did they do this? Oh, did they do that? Oh, did they, you know, it's like you're missing the whole point. You'll never get it either. Number 8, every negotiation has tangibles and intangibles. A tangible is the terms of the agreement. And you might say that's enough. Why isn't it enough? Why isn't it enough? The tangibles of any agreement are the terms. Because an agreement can be reversed. An agreement can be, I think what Artemis is saying is, it's very difficult to enforce the contract in another country. So what you are going to rely on, and I'm here to tell you that this point right here is going to be one of the biggest points you should take out of international business. What you are going to rely on is your intangible, and by that I mean your reputational equity. How much they respect you, how much they appreciate your abilities, how much they admire your abilities is going to get you further than going back to the recital and saying, oh, in the recital, you know, whatever, point 4, it says this. How many of you know someone who that's all they care about. In the U.S., that might be enough. Actually, in the U.S., it's not even enough. You will get more distance building a good reputation in any country, but especially abroad. When you have problems with the contract, and trust me, there will be problems on the contract before the ink is dried. What's going to pull you out of that nosedive is going to be your reputation, the way they respect you. That's exactly right, Dave. Do not let the tangibles dictate the relationship. The relationship is dictated from people to people. Number 9, every relationship is a new experience. Reflect on it. Number 10, we've already gone over that. Prior preparation prevents what? Prevents disaster. Prevents poor performance. Excellent. That's right. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. That's a lot of information to throw at you in today's session. That's a lot of information. What I want you to do is I want you to take a look at this. I want you to review it. And Ben, that was the original quote as I was taught. Nonetheless, what I want you guys to do is I want you to take today's lessons, I want you to review them, and I really want you to, what would be great is if you actually created a page in a complete document, maybe it's 2 or 3 pages, and you laminate it. Laminate it, because you're going to want to keep these for a very long time. You're going to want to keep them. I myself carry them around and I use them. I myself reflect on them regularly. I myself have to have them in writing. I have to do it. I have to every single time I go through the motions, because of the prior preparation prevents poor performance. Okay. I will see you guys on Thursday, same time, same channel. Over and out. Great class today, guys.